Hi everyone, this is Zan from LotusTunes. Today I'm going to be walking you through a driving melodic techno track in the style of Anyma and Innellea. Let's get straight into the video. So you can see at the very top of this session I have the drums group. So at the very top of the session you can see the kick track, which sounds like this. And you can see for the kick track that I loaded in a drum rack that you can find under drums, drum rack, or instruments drum rack. And I like this because this gives me the opportunity to load in multiple kick sounds. So for instance, if I would want to load in other kicks, I would do so by selecting some that sound good to me. And I'd load them into the individual pads, go into this panel over here, and then I could always switch the kicks during the composition of the track. Right underneath the kick track, you can see a pre-kick sweep. It's almost unnoticeable in the entirety of the mix, but it gives the kick a bit of a pre-shift and kind of a small anticipation before every kick hits. Cool, I like that effect. So right underneath our kick, we have our hi-hat, which is really important for our groove. Really simple hi-hat, didn't do a lot of processing here. Underneath the hi-hat we have the clap or the clap layers, which sound like this. Clap number 1 sounds like this. And underneath clap 1 we have clap 2 that has a bit more reverb loaded on top and has more high frequencies. And if we layer those together, then I added an offbeat clap that plays in between those claps. The core drums together, it would sound like this. And then what I'd like to do from there is add more details to the drums. So I'd add hats. And as you can see in this loops channel over here, I have a few hi-hats, a few different variation of hi-hats. So if I'd solo the first layer, that would sound like this. And then from then on, I added some accentuation hi-hats, which sound like this on their own. Has a bit of a different vibe, a different feeling, and those go well with each other. But you can hear there's a bit of white noise action going on in the background. That's because we have a group. These hi-hats are moving into a group called Hats Looped. And on this Hats Loop channel, I have a plugin called Retro Color 20 loaded. What this does is it gives me the opportunity to load in a noise or something like a noise oscillator. If I would disable this track, it will sound like this. A lot more flat, but if we enable it, you hear the difference? It gives a completely different and new texture to our drums. And what I do is go through the individual noise samples here. I'm going to solo the hi-hats for this. It's really fun. And you could hit follow, crank up that follow knob here. You have like these atmospheric sounds as well. Pink noise, white noise. But I think for the sake of this one, I chose this 15-inch type. Cool. And you can see there's another layer to our hi-hats here, which sounds like this. It's basically a duplicate of this accentuation hi-hats layer, but the groove is much more stable. And what I mean by stable is it's not going up and down all the time. It's a very stable groove, like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Compared to this one here, it feels more inconsistent. And I like having inconsistent as well as consistent loops compiled together. create a nice and unique texture. What's great about having these hi-hat layers is that you can introduce each layer as the arrangement progresses. You can see here in the first 8 bars of the track, I have the 2 main loops playing. In the second 8 bars, I have the next loop coming in. And in the next 8 bars, I even have another one coming in. So those are really practical to have to progress your arrangement as well. So make sure to find a couple of nice hi-hat loops, layer those, and add those progressively as your track plays. Within this loops track, you can also find another track called Harsh Shakers, which sound like this on their own. Just adds a bit more texture. We're going to get back to the vocals in a minute, but first I'd like to elaborate on why these tracks here are going to a sidechain ducking channel. Usually we'd be routing them into the master, right? But I'm going to be actually routing them into sidechain ducking because I want the kick, which is this here, this track, to be reducing everything else in volume whenever it hits. So whenever our kick hits, we have that volume reduction, that up and down, that pumping effect that we want for this genre, melodic techno, right? That gives us so much drive and groove. If I solo the kick with the loops, you can see what the kick is doing to them. And if we open up this panel over here, you can set the sidechain trigger, which is the kick. And you can also tell these loops to move into this audio track, which is sidechain ducking. It's just an audio track with an input here. And you can start readjusting your sidechain parameters like the threshold and the ratio. This determines how harsh your sidechain sounds. I usually like leaving it around infinity to 1 for really direct compression, or around 4 to 1 if you want to go for a softer compression. Cool, so let's move down to the atmosphere. When I have the core drums and the loops ready, the first thing I like to do is to create atmosphere. In some cases, I'd also start with the atmosphere because I find that to be a determining character-giving element of the track. And the atmosphere on its own sounds like this. I mean, that sets the tone of the track so much, with the drums, of course, as well. And if we play those together with the drums that we have here. So much of the track's vibe is coming from these 2 elements alone, the atmosphere and the drums. And the atmosphere enables us to move on to the next section of the track too, which is the melodics. So our first atmosphere layer is our texture. Very quiet, almost not noticeable. Let me turn that up a bit. Like this really dark industrial texture sound. That slowly fades in towards the intro. Sounds really gritty and almost like, I don't know, kind of horrifying as well. I felt like it sounded pretty cool and fitting to the whole vibe of dark and melodic techno. You can find this atmosphere as well as other atmospheric sounds from Melodic Techno Volume 1 from Production Music Live. So check that out. And then every 8 bars you can see that I used this dark underground stab to fill in the void in the track. So this is something I like to do for variation. Stab number 1 sounds like this. Number 2 sounds like this. So a bit higher. Number 3. It's basically the same stab sound, just pitched up 7 semitones. And you see that I do this for the entire track. And this really fills out the void, the emptiness of the track, and gives it like a darker, more underground feeling. So we have these 2 texture sounds, right? But what I'd like for atmosphere is having a pad layer or something that's basically played throughout the track in the background, and therefore I have this atmospheric pluck sound that's almost like an arpeggio. And you can see there's some crazy stuff going on here with this gain up. Show the automation. It looks like this. So I manually drew in the automation from this track here. And before effects, it sounded like this. So first of all, I reduced that harsh resonant frequency. Then I created a pluck out of that by automating this gain knob here. And then I added some delay, some ping pong delay. So I created a pluck out of this pad sound. And I remember this pad sound originally coming from this synth over here. Yeah. And this preset is actually the pad moving preset from Organica Volume 2. And what I did is I recorded that sound into a new track and came up with this sound over here that I previously showed you without effects. Sounds like this. It's the same exact sound, no processing whatsoever. Added an EQ, created a pluck using utility, and added some delay. And if you want to see the automation that I did, it looks crazy. It looks like this. It's basically just a saw wave that plays throughout the entire loop. And underneath this Atmos plucked layer, you can find another layer called Atmos low. And what this is basically the same sound, just pitched down a few octaves and resampled. So it sounds like this. And what I did is I removed some of the low end frequencies and the high end frequencies to just give the other atmospheres more space in the mix. And underneath this Atmos low sound, we have another atmospheric sound, which is called Atmos high stab. Sounds like this, plays every 2 bars. So if we'd add our atmosphere all together now, this would sound like this. Cool. You can see these atmospheres are not going into sidechain. They're going into the master channel because I didn't want the ducking to be applied to them. Cool. That was the beginning of the track. That's how I got the vibe started. Now I needed some type of arpeggio or synthesizer sound, which sounds like this if we enable it. Now we're talking. Now we're really heading into the right direction. And this ARP is a Serum preset called Cassian. It's from the Production Music Live Melodic Techno Volume 2 pack. Her processing didn't do much, just added a bit of reverb, as you can see here. Some auto filter to introduce the sound during the intro here. And I did a lot of cutoff automation, so the main filter is being automated. And also some automation on the decay, so that ultimately determines the length of the sound. If I change the knob, you can hear the difference. That sounds pretty dope. You can do a lot of these automating to create tension towards the build-up. And there's also a Valhalla delay that is basically just used in the tension in the build-up part. So if I play that for you. I mean, that's pretty dope, right? Automation really helps to create tension. And this preset, of course, is really amazing. It has these macros assigned that you can automate as well. So yeah, feel free to grab that as well. These sound like this in total. Got ourselves a really stable groove now. We want to add more though. Like, where's the bass? We need a bass sound. Where's the bass? We have that over here. And it on its own sounds like this. Really clean sound. This is the PML Bass Noise 2 sound, which is from the Melodic Techno Volume 2 Dimensions pack from Production Music Live. Amazing. It's a really simple sound. There's not a lot going on. You have two oscillators with a noise oscillator enabled here. Some cutoff for this plucky sound. And a bit of distortion, hyperdimension, reverb, and EQ to the sound. So it's really the perfect sound if you want to create sub-bass groove patterns like this, because it also is pretty short. And if we'd play this bass sound just with our kick, it would sound like this. Holy. I mean, those two elements together are just amazing. If we enable our atmosphere, the other drum elements. This main bass patch is also going into the basses group, and the basses group is in turn going into our sidechain ducking channel that I previously showed you up here. So our kick is reducing our bass in its volume. Yeah, so that's for the main part. Those are the main elements of our track. And you can see right towards this point of the track, we remove most of our elements. That's because we want to make space for the break. And if we transition from this part to the break, that sounds like this. So everything basically moves back to zero. We have our arpeggio, the melodic elements in focus, and we have this sub drop here. And this is basically just a simple sine note. So our root note over here, A#0. And I use the hip hop sub bass preset from Ableton Live. This comes with Ableton Live. And if we double click it and go into the automation panel over here, hit MIDI control pitch bend, you can see that there's a pitch bend automation. And that's really great if you want to create these sub drops for your break. And all I did here was increase the release, so the sub sound doesn't just stop there, it actually fades out. So increase that to 127 here. To enable better transitions, I use these impact sounds as well. I just spread those out through the track. There's this clap fill as well. All that does is just really fill out the track. And there's this transition before the main drop part, which sounds kind of vocal-ish, so that's cool too. In the break, we also have a few different elements like this vocal sound over here.
You know I'm not the one for you.
Yeah. Also really cool. And you can see that for the vocal sample, I automated this little delay knob over here. So this basically enables our delay to be feedback throughout the track. So right when the vocal ends, this delay feedback is turned on, and this adds to the whole tension that we're trying to create in the build-up or break. And you can find these vocal sounds in PML's Vocals Volume 1 pack, by the way. That has a lot of these vocals that are great for melodic techno as well. And if I'd play that for you, it sounds like this.
You know I'm not the one for you.
Pay attention to how it's looped now. I mean, those two elements alone create so much tension. Cool. And another element that really creates a lot of tension is this snare build over here. And I basically just use this DS Max for Live sound and drew in a couple of 16th notes. There's a bit of automation going on as well, some reverb automation. And I also automate the highs in the build up here. And the sound that you've all been waiting for, the main Anyma Innellea type bass stab. Really simple, honestly. This is just the root note. A sharp being played in this pattern over here. And this sound consists of two different layers, one being this layer over here. And this, the main bass stab, which sounds like this on its own. So that sound is the ARP 1X from the Serum Presets Melodic Techno Volume 1 pack, layered with this stab over here that is called Bass Variation. That's from Melodic Techno Volume 2. And if we play that together with the whole track, it sounds like this. Awesome. I love that. That synth alone is just also makes up so much of the track's character. I love it. And I didn't do a lot of processing for these sounds. I did a lot of automating though. Like I changed the length of the cutoff for these sounds in the drop. You can see that there's a bit of automation going on here for the filter cutoff on this first sound. I like to move around these sounds a lot. So there's always movement within these sounds. They're never too stale. And for the second sound, the same. I'm also going to plus this, move it into a new layer. And I also added some decapitator to both of those layers to add some crunch, some drive to both of those sounds. And the first sound is actually pretty dry on its own. This one here. The second sound, that sounds a bit more aggressive and larger, has a bit of reverb loaded in as well. Then in the R drop, we have our vocal coming in. And just to add some variation to the second part of the drop, after that vocal, we have a ride sample that sounds like this. That just adds a bit more energy to the drop. Let me play that for you. And then it just comes down to arranging the track, adding some variations. I would say every 8 bars, subtracting elements from the intro, adding some more during the progression of the track, as you can see over here. So every 8 bars, I'd add a new loop or some variation to the background of the track, some main element. Add these transitions between each section of the track. And you can hear a bit of a break, a build up, and this drop hitting. Okay everyone, that was it for this video. If you enjoyed, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. You can also grab these sounds using the links down in the description below. And if you want to see more of me, you can also check me out on LotusTunes Academy on YouTube. So feel free to do that as well. Thank you very much for watching again. Peace.